Coming up, today's episode is called Stacey's Business Plan, or as we informally say, business plan. We could also have called it Moolah for Stacey, but this is all about how the EPA, Biden's EPA, gave Stacey Abrams $2 billion for, get this, home appliances. I'm going to give you the details. I want to know where all that money went. I'm going to explain the significance of Trump's new Bitcoin strategic reserve, and Ezra Levant joins me. He's the founder of Rebel News in Canada. We're going to talk about Trudeau stepping down and Canada's political future. Hey, if you're watching on Rumble or YouTube or X, listening on Apple, Google, or Spotify, please subscribe to my channel. Hit the subscribe or follow or the notifications button. I'd really appreciate it. This is the Dinesh D'Souza podcast.
America needs this voice. The times are crazy. In a time of confusion, division, and lies, we need a brave voice of reason, understanding, and truth. This is the Dinesh D'Souza podcast.
I noticed this morning that the X platform is down. In fact, I'm scheduled to do a Spaces with Josie. This is the Josie, the redheaded libertarian, on X tonight. I think it's 6 p.m. Central. Is that right, honey? So 7 p.m. Eastern. It will be postponed or rescheduled if X doesn't come back up. So I don't know if this is some sort of attack on X or if it's just something that has caused them to take it down. Which happens from time to time. Debbie and I were joking over coffee that, you know, in the old days, we didn't have X. We didn't have these platforms, and now what happened to X? It's gone down for 5 minutes. Everyone's all agitated. And so this is indeed the new world we live in. Now, I want to touch on a couple of issues that popped up over the weekend, and then I want to talk about Stacey Abrams. So my first comment has to do with Joe Biden and our suspicion over a long period of time, certainly toward the end. There are people who caught on to this later, but many of us were onto it from the beginning, that Biden really never was the effective president. You couldn't even call him the acting president. So, I mean, this is so funny because the guy was, he's an illegitimate president. He wasn't really elected. Number two, you may say, well, yeah, but at least he's the acting president. No, he wasn't. And it wasn't just that he was the front man at the end, because some people think, well, he's obviously reached a point in which the senility set in, the dementia set in. Even the left had to admit that toward the end. But I think that what happened toward the end was the same as what was happening all the way along. It's just that they were able to pull this off, the conceal Biden's dementia trick for the entire time, and they were only busted at the very end. No wonder that they thought, these smarty pants Democrats thought, you know what, we can get away with it for another 4 years. And we got away with it for these 4. So no one's the wiser. The media that does know is playing along with us. They're on our side, so we can count on them to keep the facade. And the question becomes, you know, is there a way to confirm that Biden was never in charge all along? And it turns out that there is a way. And one clue that has come out just in the last few days is this. The vast majority of the official documents signed by Biden over his entire 4 years were not, in fact, signed by him, by his hand. They were all signed really by the same auto pen signature. Now, those of us who've worked in the White House, and probably you do too, you know as well that there is an auto pen. Usually when the president has to sign the same document multiple times, let's just say, for example, he's signing, 100 pardons, you use the auto pen. That way Biden or Trump doesn't have to sign themselves. But usually, for singular documents, the president signs. You've seen Trump signing the executive orders. He's signing himself. And what we know is that in the statement where Biden said, I'm getting out of the race, if you look at his signature, he signs Joseph Biden. But then if you look at the auto pen, it's a completely different signature. So you know that's not Biden. That was signed by the auto pen. And the fact that the auto pen essentially was the mode of signature throughout the Biden not pregnancy, but presidency. What does that tell you? It tells you the same thing that it tells me. This dude was not running the show. Here's Trump on South Africa, item 2. He says that South Africa is terrible to these farmers. It's confiscating their land, their farms, and much worse than that, meaning he's referring here obliquely to the murders. A bad place to be right now. We're stopping all federal funding. Excellent. But to go a step further, any farmer with family from South Africa wanting to flee that country will be invited to the United States with the pathway to citizenship. The process will begin immediately. Now, it is worth noting that the abuses in South Africa have been going on for years. The media looks the other way because, quite simply, the victims are white. And so there's a little bit of an uncomfortable sense on the part of the media. These white people oppressed the black people for a long time. Now it's the black people's turn. Leave them alone. Let them trample over the whites. It's perfectly okay. Or at least it's something we don't really want to be commenting on. But see, I think that just as black people have a right not to be treated in the way that blacks were once treated, so do white people have a right not to be treated in the way that blacks were once treated. In other words, this kind of behavior based upon race and motivated by race is just as abominable now as it was before. And there's really no such thing as, the reason it doesn't work to say they did it to us, we're doing it to them, is we're not talking about the same people. In other words, the white farmers that are being tormented today are not the ones that did apartheid in the 1950s and 60s and 70s. So this is truly the feudal transmission of guilt through the generations. And that is really what Trump is, I think, rightfully objecting to here. Now, let me turn to Stacey Abrams and that $2 billion grant that was given to her organization or to her constellation of organizations by the EPA. According to Stacey Abrams appearing on MSNBC and talking to Chris Hayes, she says, "Oh yeah, I got that money." Think of it, $2 billion, $2,000 million. She got it for what? She goes, well, I actually got it to purchase new home appliances aimed at lowering electricity costs. What? First of all, the EPA is giving $2 billion to Stacey Abrams to give away to people to buy new appliances? First of all, why Stacey Abrams? The answer is Stacey Abrams now gets to be the provider of this largesse, probably, by the way, by keeping a big chunk of money for her own organizations or for herself. This is one of the pathways to riches for politicians. And as Debbie and I have commented before, this could very well also be a big thank you for Stacey Abrams' role in the 2020 election and Stacey Abrams affiliated groups. But in any event, apparently this money was allocated to a single town, DeSoto, Georgia. DeSoto, Georgia has a population of under 200 people. 85 homes apparently got some appliance upgrades. Well, if you do the math, that is, you just divide 1.9 billion or 2 billion by 85 homes, it's like $20 million per home. I mean, it is a preposterous, I'm doing the math a little bit here in my head, but it doesn't make any sense. And second, as I say, why is the EPA doing this? What impact does this have? Think of it, if 85 homes have new appliances and they save a little bit on electricity, is this the way? Is this a sensible allocation of $2 billion to regulate the climate? No, it isn't. It's not even about the climate. It's all about slipping money into the big fat pocketbook of the big fat Stacey Abrams. It is about fattening Stacey Abrams' coffers. This is corruption pure and simple. So I hope that the Trump people are not satisfied with, oh, we've brought an end to it, we've stopped this corruption. Corruption needs to be punished. And this is perhaps my concern at this point, and that is that all we're doing is exposing people and stopping the looting. But what about the looters? What about the perp walks? What about the arrests? What about holding these people accountable for essentially embezzlement and stealing, which is no less stealing if it's happening basically with thieves that are embedded inside the government. So I think this stuff needs to be looked at by Pam Bondi's DOJ. And this, I think, is the unanswered question about Pam Bondi. That she's loyal to Trump, nobody doubts. But is she up for the task in going after these bad guys and holding them accountable? This is a question that remains to be answered. You don't go out and buy a life jacket when the boat is already sinking. You don't buy gold when the economy is already collapsed. It's all a matter of doing it in the right time. Now, gold has been going up in the first part of 2025, and it's not too late for you to benefit from that. The company you should contact to help you diversify into physical gold is Birch Gold. This is the company where Debbie and I buy our gold from. Birch Gold specializes in helping you to convert an existing IRA or 401k into a tax-sheltered IRA in physical gold, and you don't pay any money out of pocket. So just listen to this 5-star review. They're knowledgeable, helpful, non-pressure. So this is what you get with Birch Gold. This is why I've endorsed them for so long. Get your free information kit on gold by texting the word Dinesh to the number 989898. There's no obligation here, just useful information. Birch Gold has an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau, countless 5-star reviews. You can trust these guys. Text Dinesh to 989898. Let the experts at Birch Gold help you secure your future today with gold. Debbie and I are a little tired of looking for good movies to watch. We're also tired of the destructive and sometimes downright perverse content flooding our screens today. This is why I joined the Angel Guild community. I wanted entertainment that inspires and uplifts and doesn't drag us down. With Angel Guild, I can vote on upcoming films. I can support movies that reflect values I align with. Plus, I get early access to inspiring content. I no longer have Hollywood entertainment pushing its perverse agenda into my home. Angel Studios is leading the charge, creating high-quality, faith-filled films like Sound of Freedom, Cabrini, and Homestead. These movies are powerful, impactful, and a must-see if you haven't already. If you want to make a real difference, where we put our dollars shapes the future of entertainment. Let's support content that amplifies light and protects our kids from harmful influences. Please join me in making a difference today by visiting angel.com/Dinesh. That's angel.com/Dinesh to join the Angel Guild now. I want to talk about the establishment in the last few days of a strategic Bitcoin reserve by the U.S. government. So this was done, Trump signed an executive order that was presented to him by the crypto czar, actually somebody I know pretty well and have known since his college days, David Sachs. And the strategic reserve is a commitment by the U.S. government to hold Bitcoin, not to hold necessarily the other cryptocurrencies. By the way, although Bitcoin is often described as a cryptocurrency, it is fundamentally different from the other cryptocurrencies. It's kind of like saying that man is an animal. True, man is an animal. But man is different than all the other animals in certain fundamental ways. So Bitcoin is more like man, and crypto is more like animal. Crypto is more a generic description of various types of currencies, often with very different purposes, some of them aimed at new types of apps on the internet, sometimes aimed at video games, sometimes aimed at creating collectibles or tokens. Bitcoin is in a category of its own. Now, I'm actually studying Bitcoin and studying it in the context of the very fascinating subject of Austrian economics. Austrian economics is the school of economics pioneered by a group of, well, originally Austrian economists, the most prominent being Ludwig von Mises, the author of the magisterial work called Human Action. And there are a number of other prominent Austrians, the monetary economist Karl Menger, the economist Eugene Bohm-Bawerk. In America, the most prominent Austrian was the late Murray Rothbard, who died, I think, somewhere in the mid-1990s, but wrote a series of very important works, not only expounding Austrian economics, but developing the concepts further. Interestingly, I knew very little about Bitcoin. My neighbor, who is an economist for a prominent oil company, Debbie and I had a cookout outside in our backyard. We were chatting, and the subject came up, and he asked me, "Oh, do you invest in cryptocurrencies or Bitcoin?" And I said, "No, because I don't like to invest in anything I don't understand." And I said, "What about you?" And he goes, "Oh, I'm like very much into Bitcoin. I've been studying it, and I know a lot about it." And so we really couldn't have a conversation because of the kind of disproportion of our knowledge. In other words, his knowledge and my lack of knowledge. So he gave me some reading material on Bitcoin, and it took me a while to get to it. And then I became very fascinated because I realized that this topic is very rich and taps into a lot of other subjects, from monetary history to basic economics, to computer science, because after all, we're talking about a type of money that is digital, the Internet of money, as someone has called it. We're talking about psychology, game theory. So this is a topic that is, I won't call it a bottomless pit, but it's certainly something that you can spend a lot of time on, and the more you learn, the more you find you have to learn. So back to the strategic reserve. The Bitcoiners, by and large, emphasize the theme of separation of money and state, and what they mean by that is let's keep this form of money, Bitcoin, outside the government. It is in fact a kind of an alternative to government-issued currency and government-issued money, which of course is the dollar notes you have and the $20 bills in your wallet. But it also has to do with the fact that the dollar is in fact fiat currency. The word fiat here meaning by declaration or by order. Fiat is legal tender. You have to pay your taxes in the form of the US dollar. You can't send the government, a check in the Thai baht or the Indian rupee and say, "Hey, I owe some money. Well, here's some rupees." No, you have to pay. That's part of the meaning of legal tender and fiat currency. The Biden administration was pretty hostile to crypto and specifically to Bitcoin. There was some debanking, in fact, of crypto companies. They were not allowed to have normal banking privileges, and this was recently exposed. Elizabeth Warren is part of this anti-crypto regime, and but with Trump, it has all changed. And so this strategic reserve, on the surface, it may appear to be a contradiction to say separation of money and state on the one hand, and on the other hand, the U.S. government is somehow going to own Bitcoin. Now, first of all, the reserve doesn't say that the U.S. government is going to use taxpayer money to buy Bitcoin. It says the opposite. The government will acquire Bitcoin, but the way to do that is to substitute for existing resources. So the government owns all kinds of assets. They own all kinds of reserves. They have an oil reserve. They may well have a grain reserve. They certainly have a whole bunch of gold, or at least they supposedly have a whole bunch of gold. I believe they do, sitting at Fort Knox and also sitting in the basement of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. So governments accumulate assets, and they can choose in what form to have these assets. Just like you choose in what form to have your assets. Do I want to keep it in jewelry or in gold, or do I want to acquire art? People make choices about how to preserve their assets. And so what's new here is the U.S. government, the first major government in the world. There are other smaller governments, El Salvador, Bhutan, but the U.S. government is now the first major government. And in fact, this is going to start off a little bit of I won't say arms race, but maybe a digital arms race is not a bad way to put it, where you talk about holding digital assets. And so this is a really new thing. It's a very big thing, and it has long-term implications. It's had no immediate, the immediate effect of the market, interestingly enough, has been to push down the Bitcoin price, maybe because the US government did not make the decision, which some people expected, to buy a whole bunch of Bitcoin and then automatically buy that act to push the price up. So there are very interesting implications here for what we call money, and what the impact of Bitcoin is going to have on our society and on the way that we think about money. So I thought it useful to tell you, this is not a topic I've covered very much on the podcast, but to kind of illuminate this new world in which everything is going digital, right? We have digital photos. We have digital directions. We don't go around with those big old maps. What do you call them, honey? The maps you used to carry around driving in your car. The key maps. We don't use the key maps anymore. We have, they were the books that with very elaborate directions, and you had to keep turning the page. So with everything going digital, it is not a surprise, is it, that money is going digital also.
I hear every day about the products you all wish MyPillow carried. Well, guess what? We probably do. Slippers, bathrobes, pet beds, blankets, mattresses, sleepwear, loungewear, duvets, comforters, pot holders, aprons, oven mitts, and so much more. And they're all on sale. For example, get our best-selling standard MyPillows for only $14.98. Body pillows, $29.98. 6-piece bath towels or kitchen towel sets, just $29.98. Multi-use MyPillow 2.0s with pillowcase, $9.98. Save $40 on our Spring Percale and Giza Dream bedsheet sets. Any size, any color, and so much more. So go to MyPillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to save up to 80% on all MyPillow products. And I've never done this before. When you spend $100 or more, you're going to get 2 standard MyPillows absolutely free.
Guys, this is a great time to become an annual subscriber to my Locals channel. It's a great way to support my work. I just put up a couple of new films into the channel. One is Trump Card, and the other is a feature thriller starring Jim Caviezel called Infidel. I post a lot of exclusive content on Locals, including content that's censored on other social media platforms. On Locals, you get Dinesh Unchained, Dinesh Uncensored, and you can interact with me directly. I do a live weekly Q&A every Tuesday. No topic is off limits. I also mentioned the new films. I've got a movie page up on Locals with documentaries and feature films, my films, but also films by other independent producers. 2000 Mules is up there, the latest film vindicating Trump. And I just told you about the new ones, Trump Card, and also a film that you'll love to see called Infidel. If you're an annual subscriber, you can stream and watch this movie content for free. It's included with your subscription. So go to dinesh.locals.com. I'd love to have you along for this great ride. Again, it's dinesh.locals.com. Guys, I'm delighted to welcome to the podcast Ezra Levant. He's the founder and owner of Rebel News in Canada. He's also the host of the Ezra Levant Show. The website is rebelnews.com. You can follow him on X at Ezra Levant, Levant. He's the author of a bunch of best-selling books, Ethical Oil, China Virus, and most recently, Trudeau's Secret Plan. Ezra, thanks for joining me. We haven't crossed paths in quite a while, so it's really good to see you again. I hope you've been doing well. And tell us about the, Trudeau is out. I think for many Americans, it was a bit of a surprise because he had announced that he was getting out, and then he seemed to be sticking around for quite a while. There was some question about whether he was going to get out, and then suddenly someone hit the eject button. So tell us about what happened to get Trudeau out, and then I'm going to have you talk a little bit about what Trudeau's legacy is.
Sure. Well, Justin Trudeau is the Gavin Newsom of Canada. If you ever thought, what would Gavin Newsom be like if he ran a country? That's Trudeau. Politically correct, woke. You know, you might remember he interrupted someone and said, we say people kind, not mankind. Like he was such a male feminist. He spent money like a drunken sailor. He neglected our military. He was part of the World Economic Forum, that group of globalists, sort of crypto-fascists, really. And he was very pro-China, anti-American, and quite anti-Trump. Now, after 9.5 years of this, Canadians just were sick of him. He was falling low in the polls. And in our parliamentary system, the MPs can vote non-confidence in a government and force an election. That was about to happen, but he ran to the Governor General, who's the King's representative in Canada, and he did a parliamentary trick. He dissolved Parliament so they couldn't vote him out. It would be like if after an impeachment trial, a president locked the doors to Congress so they couldn't actually vote him out. That's the move Trudeau did. But his time finally ran out, and yesterday, Trudeau was replaced by the Liberal Party with Trudeau 2.0, a guy named Mark Carney, who was also on the board of the World Economic Forum, who is also a globalist, who in fact has 3 different passports, hasn't lived in Canada for years, and he's all about ESG. He's a green scheme carbon tax guy. So we really have a replacement of Trudeau who's the same as Trudeau, except he just doesn't have the reputation of being 9 years in every scandal and fiasco. So I don't know. He's going to have to go to an election fairly soon because he doesn't even have a seat in our parliament. He was selected, not elected. So that's the update from Canada. But let me just say this as a proud Canadian who also loves America. Boy, I hope that Carney doesn't push us further away from America. Trudeau liked jabbing at Trump, and Trump jabbed back. And I'm worried that an excellent relationship was sort of caught in the crossfire. And you mentioned some of my books, but I just published a new one because I have this idea of how Trump can have an America first approach to Canada, that America wins, and that it doesn't let Trudeau or his successor, Mark Carney, derail things. And I don't know if you know this, Dinesh, but do you know that after Saudi Arabia and Venezuela, do you know that Canada, our oil sands, are the 3rd largest oil reserves in the world? I don't think a lot of Americans know that. And we're actually your number 1 source of foreign oil, which is why we have such a big trade deficit with you. I mean, Trump is frustrated by the trade deficit, but you can't put a tariff on the oil sands that would move the oil sands to America like a factory. Like you could put a tariff on a Honda factory in Mexico and Ford or Honda will say, well, let's move it to America. You can't do that with oil. It's in the ground where it is. And so if you could put a tariff on it, but that's just going to be paid by the American refineries. My proposal, I try to think like an America first MAGA guy. And I'm thinking, isn't it in America's interest not to push away the oil sands, but to pull them closer, to make sure China can't sniff around and acquire that oil? And in fact, there's so much oil in Alberta, and I talked to the premier of Alberta, that's like our governor. She's pro-America. She actually went down to Trump's inauguration, the only premier in Canada to do so. She says that Alberta wants to double its oil production. Dinesh, imagine instead of pushing Canadian oil away, if Trump signed a 50-year, 170 billion barrel deal to buy all the oil sands oil, doubled, and that would displace all of the foreign conflict oil that America now imports. And here's the kicker. You know how much money the Pentagon spends defending the Persian Gulf sea lanes every year? About $50 billion a year. If you displaced all that foreign crude with Canadian ethical oil, you wouldn't need to spend $50 billion in blood and treasure patrolling the Persian Gulf. So that's my book. It's called Deal of the Century. And I'm thinking Donald Trump wants to do a deal in Greenland, wants to do a deal in Panama, he wants to do a deal in Gaza. Do the big deal first. Do the big deal in Canada. And then say to Canadians, we're doing such a big deal with you, we expect you to double your expenditures in NATO. And I bet that would work. So that's my big thesis. That's why I wanted to come on your show, Dinesh.
I mean, Ezra, what a brilliant idea this is, and I think that what you're saying here is very important, because what you're saying here is that there cannot be a MAGA or America First agenda that doesn't expect other countries to also put their own country first, right? In other words, Trump can't go to Modi and say, I want America to be first, but I want you to put India last. That doesn't make any sense. A responsible nationalism understands people's fidelity to their own countries and envisions a world in which we can all prosper together. And what you're saying here is that there is not only a kind of an existing alliance and friendship between the United States and Canada, a kind of neighborly friendship that you'd have with, let's say, the guy who lives next door across the fence, but there is the opportunity to cement that friendship with a handshake commercial deal that is greatly to the benefit of both sides. The Canadians have the oil. The Americans need oil. We've been talking for 30 years about reducing dependency on the Middle East and how unstable the supply is from countries that could be at each other's throats. And what you're saying is that this is a way for America and Canada to do a reciprocal deal that is very much in the spirit of MAGA.
I think you're right. And I know that Trump has been yanking Trudeau's chain about the 51st state and things like that. I mean, and I love the banter and I love the sense of humor. Donald Trump's one of a kind. But for those who are taking that seriously, look, you don't want another California-sized Democrat-leaning factor in the Electoral College. You don't want to deal with the French-English bilingualism. How about take the good stuff? You already have the USMCA, which has a special preference for America for buying our oil. Come and take it. Hey, one more wrinkle. You know, a lot of the companies working in Canada's oil sands, they're either American companies or they're Canadian companies with large U.S. investors. So you're actually getting the bonus on both sides of the borders. It's American companies producing the oil sands, an American pipeline. Like, let's get that Keystone XL open again. That was so close to being finished until Joe Biden killed it on his first day. Trump has expressed interest in that. Let's open that up. That alone would displace all the oil from Venezuela. Get off the foreign conflict oil. Like, Canadian oil is effectively American oil. And Trump can have some demands in return that I think good faith Canadians would accept. We've got to get rid of this fentanyl problem. We've got to crack down on the porous border. I mean, there really are terrorists trying to come from Canada into the States. It's a fact. We got to shape up here for our own sake, not just because Trump wants it. We have to respect our own sovereignty and have a stronger border. And, you know, we were with you guys shoulder to shoulder at D-Day. You had Utah Beach and Omaha Beach. We had Juno Beach. Canadian soldiers were punching above our weight. We were with you in Korea. We were with you in Afghanistan. So, you know, we're never going to be as big and as powerful as you. I like to say it's like Batman and Robin. They can still be friends and allies. We know we're going to be the junior partner, but let's be friends and allies again. And I think that Trudeau and Trump there was sort of a personal vendetta there. With Trudeau gone, I'm really hopeful that we can get things positive. And you're so right about everyone can win in an America First style global relationship. Both sides have to put, you know the old saying, don't get mad, don't get even, get ahead. What's the get ahead move for America Firsters? Buy up the oil so China can't. That's how I would sum things up in one sentence. Buy all the oil, not just part of it. Buy it all. And I think let's be friends again. That's what I'm here to say.
I mean, it's kind of the big move that I think Trump likes. Now, let's talk a little bit about within Canada, I really like, admittedly, I think my original affection for Pierre Poilievre was driven by his apple eating episode in which he had that salty conversation with the journalist. But I've watched a bunch of stuff from him since then. Now, he's not identical with Trump, but I love his plain-spoken style. Now, the question I have, and it's a bit of a delicate question, is that I hope that Trump is not hurting the chances of Poilievre to win in the forthcoming election, because it'd be a pity if somehow this America-Canada stuff caused the Canadians to rally behind Trudeau's party and keep Carney as the prime minister. And it also seems to me that the deal you're describing is one that a Pierre Poilievre could do with Trump. So talk a little bit about that issue and about the Canadian election.
Pierre Poilievre is probably the most conservative leader of the Canadian Conservative Party since Stephen Harper. And Stephen Harper was a great friend of the United States. Even though he was there at the same time as Barack Obama, he managed to keep it together and to have a friendly relationship. I think Obama respected Harper, even though Harper was very conservative. Poilievre was a cabinet minister in that Harper government. Poilievre is against the carbon tax. He's for strengthening our military. He's anti-woke. And as that apple eating clip shows, he doesn't let journalists push him around. So I think a lot of Americans would like Pierre Poilievre. Obviously, we're talking about Canada, so he's not going to be as right-wing as an American, but he's about the best the Conservative Party has to offer. I'm excited about him. But you're so right. With Donald Trump poking at this 51st state thing, some Canadians, their pride is hurt. They don't understand that's Trump's trademark sense of humor, and Trump is such a character. Sometimes people don't know what to make of him. So yes, the Liberal Party of Canada has suddenly discovered patriotism again after being anti-patriotic for so many years. I mean, they were tearing down statues. They took our founding prime minister off our $10 bill. They've denounced Canada as a genocidal country against First Nations. So suddenly the Liberals are pretending they care about patriotism and nationalism, and they're getting away with it because they would rather run against Trump instead of run against Pierre Poilievre. Now, obviously, Trump's not on the ballot, but the Liberals, all they do is talk about Trump. So I don't think it's going to work for them. I think Pierre Poilievre's going to win. But I hope we can get past this so we can, get ahead. Let's do business with each other. Let's be military allies. Let's fix this border thing. And I sure hope Mark Carney isn't the same personally Trudeau insulted Trump all the time. And I don't think Trump paid attention to most of it. Trump's got bigger fish to fry. But I sure hope Mark Carney, I don't like him because he's a globalist left-winger, but I hope he's not as spiteful towards Trump as Trudeau was.
Very interesting. Well, this is important stuff. And I think part of your message here is for Trump, hey, you like the trolling, and you like to refer to the Canadian Prime Minister as the governor. But it might be good to trim that back right now. The Canadians are moving into an election season. The last thing that we want to do is help out the bad guys in Canada. And for that reason alone, it might be good for Trump to turn his attention to some other things. And also to show an openness to doing the kind of big deal that you describe. I'm glad you're writing about it, Ezra, because I haven't heard this before. I'm going to, you've come up with it. It's a fascinating and I think brilliant idea. And so I hope that this little podcast has some impact in amplifying it here in the United States and perhaps getting other people to pick up and trumpet the idea so that Trump himself gets a wind of it and goes forward with it. Guys, I've been talking to Ezra Levant, the founder of Rebel News. Rebelnews.com is the website. Follow him on X at Ezra Levant. Ezra, hey, thank you very much for joining me. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you, my friend, and good luck. And I hope some Americans say, yeah, that's the right path to go on. Thanks for giving me a forum.
Absolutely. I'm in the very last part of The Big Lie. I think I should be able to finish tomorrow. And if you are checking in late, no worries. This is the part in which I sum things up. So you get a clear picture of where this book has come or where it's ended up. This chapter, the last chapter, is called denazification, and I lay out how to defeat the fascism and Nazism of the left. Now, the first thing to do in defeating the fascism of the left is to recognize it for what it is. And this, as we've seen, is not so easy to do because our fascist left purports to be anti-fascist. So it would be like socialists calling themselves capitalists, or tall people calling themselves short. And so your starting point is to recognize that the self-description of the left is not only misleading, but the truth is the opposite. Not only has the left falsely positioned itself as anti-fascist, it has also falsely positioned us, the right, as fascist. So those are the two sides of the left's, you could call it, disinformation coin. And I call it disinformation rather than misinformation because, well, to me, disinformation is deliberate. It's kind of like Soviet disinformation. The Soviet government is putting it out. They know that what they're putting out is false, but they're putting it out nevertheless. Misinformation can be someone who's mistaken. That's misinformation. That's not right, but it doesn't mean you're deliberately promulgating the falsehood. So the left is very much like the vicious sibling when you're a kid who punches you in the face and then starts complaining, "Mommy, Mommy, Dinesh has been punching me." No, I haven't been punching you. You've been punching me. So we're in the bizarre situation where the real fascists pretend to be anti-fascists while accusing the real anti-fascists, us, of being, well, fascists. So this is the big lie. The big lie isn't just about fixing the fascist and Nazi label on Trump or on the right. It's also aimed at concealing the fascist and Nazi roots of the American left. So they're lying about who they are, and they're lying about who we are. So let's catch this process a little more closely. Here's how the left lies about the fascists and about the Nazis to create a false contrast between the Nazis and them. So the left says, the Nazis were capitalist. Well, we are anti-capitalist. The Nazis were Christian. We're secular, meaning we, the left, are secular. The Nazis were anti-abortion. We, the left, support the right to abortion. The Nazis were repressed and sexually conventional, but we leftists are sexually liberated bohemians. In fact, on all these points, the views of the left and the National Socialists are exactly the same. The Nazis were anti-capitalist. They were anti-Christian. They were opposed to a right to life. And so the left is not telling us the truth about who the fascists and the Nazis really were. And now let's watch the big lie operate from the other end. This is how the left lies about itself to camouflage its own ideological and tactical proximity to the Nazis. So the left says the Nazis were the party of racism, were the party of anti-racism. The Nazis enslaved people, were the party of anti-slavery. The Nazis perpetrated genocide and racial terrorism. We would never do that. The Nazis were viciously intolerant of dissenting views. We, the left, are unbelievably tolerant. Wait, as we've seen, and this is, I think, the case that's been made in this book, in America, it was the Democratic Party that was the party of slavery and segregation and racism and the Ku Klux Klan. It remains the party of identity politics to this day. While the Republicans were founded as the anti-slavery party, the Republicans continue to favor a colorblind society. The Republicans are the ones who are tolerant in a polite, respectful, old-fashioned American way that the politically correct, speech-banning progressives cannot stand. So first step, as I mentioned, expose the left. Expose these guys as the party of fascism and not anti-fascism. Now, here's a case where the right doesn't like to do this kind of thing. By and large, Republicans are the party of the easygoing people, the nice guys going along to get along. And so Republicans make the mistake, our side makes the mistake of trying to appease, trying to accommodate trying to become part of this left-wing consensus or this left-wing regime so that we don't become the targets of it. This is an understandable impulse, but let's remember this is exactly the impulse that brought about fascism and Nazism in the first place. Fascism and Nazism consolidated themselves in Italy and in Germany by demanding of the political establishment, including the right, that the right look the other way, that the right figure out a modus operandi, a kind of a way of getting along with the fascists and the Nazis. And to its long regret, this is in fact what the conservative parties in Germany and Italy did. The monarchy in Italy, the center-right party in Germany, did not use its full force against the fascists, which would have defeated them, which would have, you may say, suffocated the fascist embryo or the fascist infant in the crib, but that was not done. And then fascism became way too dangerous. Now, how do we fight fascism in the broad sense? This is worth thinking about in connection with Trump, because fascism is the all-powerful Leviathan state. That's the meaning of it. Here's a line from Mussolini. Fascism conceives the state as an absolute, in comparison to which all individuals or groups are relative, only to be conceived of in their relation to the state. And then fascism represents the spirit of the nation. So, quite clearly, dismantling the state, dismantling the excesses of the state, the oversized state. This is a key part of what anti-fascism, which is to say MAGA, which is to say Trump, means. For the fascist theoreticians like Giovanni Gentile, the fascist state was more like a single body, an organism. And the individuals are mere cells within the body. So the individuals don't really count. Each cell is meaningless. The cells are valuable to the degree that they serve the body. Yes, Gentile, the legitimate will of the citizens is that will that corresponds to the will of the state. You don't have a will apart from the state. And this is the way the left thinks now. This is the way the Democrats are. And so we need to cut this state back. We need to sort of starve the beast. We need to lop off some of its organs. We need to cut it down to size. And this is, in fact, what Trump is doing. This is the meaning of the Doge project. If you want to know what this elimination of waste and fraud is, it is the starting point of chopping off the tentacles of Leviathan. There are many ways to do this, and it seems like the Trump agenda is all over it. Number one, comprehensive tax reform. If you lower taxes, you're lowering the fodder that feeds the beast. Reduce regulations. Same thing. The beast thrives on rules. The more rules, the more ways they get to tell you what to do. The more you privatize government, sell off large tracts of land. Notice that Trump is selling off government buildings. Excellent idea. Reduce the power of Leviathan. Regional autonomy. The state is all about centralization, bringing power. This is how you get a dictator. The dictator becomes the single person that embodies the will of the state. That's how Mussolini saw himself. That's how Hitler saw himself. So the answer to that is federalism. Scatter the powers of the government. And notice that's exactly what we're doing. Now, some people will say, well, this idea of states' rights, Dinesh, this is, this was used to defend slavery and segregation. And my answer is, yes, it was. But that was done by the Democratic Party. For us, on the other side, states' rights serves a completely different purpose. Undermining the power of the state, returning large swaths of power to local government and to state government. And so this idea of shutting down the Department of Education, sending it back to the states, this idea that Kash Patel is pursuing, which is take these FBI agents all sitting in Washington, D.C. and plotting against Trump, send them off to Tuscaloosa, Alabama, send them off to Phoenix, send them off to Salt Lake City, scatter them, let them work on local cases. This is all part of Trump's enterprise, but part of what I want to stress is it's also part of the anti-fascist enterprise.
Subscribe to the Dinesh D'Souza podcast on Apple, Google, and Spotify, or watch on Rumble, YouTube, and SalemNow.com.